Dimp Digital Presents Idle Game Chat.
Hello, Apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to Idle Game Chat. This is the weekly video games podcast where we give our impressions of the games that you can play today and react to the latest news from the wonderful world of video games. We're here every Monday on your favourite podcast app and YouTube, absolutely free. This time I'm joined by one of the OG members of the podcast. On the very first podcast, which actually went up a few weeks ago as a classic episode over the bank holiday, it's not Hall, who we had the other week, it's Logan. What's going on?
Unbelievable. It just doesn't happen very often.
No.
As we were just saying off of this, it probably helps when I play games, and not just any games that are sort of semi-new out. I'm usually, or have been of late, a little bit late to the party and stuff. So
You've been rotting as well, let's be honest.
There has been some rot. There's no two ways about that. But I got out of it, played Creed, got that done. 100 and something hours wasted there.
That's
and then,
true.
Pulled me out the bins and we're starting to play stuff again. So it's all good.
It is indeed. Now, I hope you weren't offended. I didn't actually give you an accolade at the start. So normally I'll say the gaming quiz winner or the fantasy gaming league winner 2-time or whatever it might be, because you haven't actually won anything individually.
Nope.
I could say you've been part of the winning fantasy gaming league team 3 times, but I don't know if that's worthwhile calling out.
No one's been ref.
No one has been ref. That should resident ref.
Yeah.
Right. I'll forget that. So it'll be 2 years before you come back. So that's wow.
It's always possible. Depends whether I'll find myself in another game in right or not.
It's the resident ref. It's Logan. How about that? That's better for people. Yep. Sort of cut that in post-edit whoever's producing this. Oh, it's me. Bollocks. Made more work for myself. Before we get into the meat of this particular show, as usual, you can support the podcast and Dimp Digital as the wider team 2 ways, really. Patreon.com/idle game chat is the place to go there. Put hand in pocket. Or on Twitch, twitch.tv/Dimp Digital, and you'll be able to subscribe to the channel either using your Amazon Prime membership, which means it'll be free to yourself, or you can, again, put hand in pocket. Free tiers available, loads of emotes, and you'll be notified when we go live and record these episodes, plus all the other great streaming that Hall mainly does. I sometimes do, and Paper dips in as well. And we sometimes get treated to Dave Cam, so that's a real treat, but that's like once a month, if that. So those are the places to go if you want to do that. If you don't want to, well, up to you in it, really, but I'll tell you what I could do with some more money, as everyone could. So you've been out the game a while, in terms of being on these podcasts to cast critique and opinion. We last had you on for the quiz, the referee. Yeah. Normally get the first 2 rounds wrong, don't you? And then you hit your swing, and then I can rely on you, because a couple of times that we've come out with different scores and you've had to be corrected. But I think after 2 or 3 rounds, you kind of get your eye in.
Yeah, it takes me a little while to get going on those quizzes, because we fart arse around for half hour before.
It's high pressure as well, because there's all those squabblers there, and any mistake, they'll jump on it.
They do and will, but as you say, generally I'll get there in the end. That's generally my motto.
Yeah.
Might not get it right first, but I'll get there in the end.
No, exactly. So we're here to primarily talk about the games that we've been playing, and one game that Logan and I have been putting a lot of time into the past few weeks is Outriders. People Can Fly. That's the developer. Game Pass. So before we start, I mean, was that the only reason it was getting a sniff in, really, in your eyes?
Well, it weren't really on the menu originally.
No.
That's the reality. It kind of was on my, kind of semi on my radar, but I'd kind of written it off. Usually I wait to be approached for these sort of things. I don't actively necessarily go out and try and...
You're not headhunting.
Yeah, I can't be doing with that headhunting. I'll be headhunted, but I ain't doing it the other way around generally. No. And then I sort of... Because we've been the Division ages ago, didn't we? Well, I did. I forced that. We've been over this.
Well, I think that was part. I mean, I know full well I could have made it happen, but I think, to be honest, when it started slowing up and nothing got said, I was like, oh, respite.
Mm. So that got a pretty long hiatus, I think. And then I texted you, didn't
Yeah.
I, a couple of weeks back? Well, about a month ago, and I said probably should kick this off again because it's lurking in the background on that backlog
Yep.
pile.
Yep.
And you originally yepped it, and then
I did.
you went, hang about, we could do this.
Mm.
If you want, we'll bung this Outriders on. So I had a little look at it, and I was like, yeah, why not? Something different, something new. And that's what kicked it all off, really.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. The fact that it was coming to Game Pass day and date. I mean, I wouldn't have normally gone out and found this and paid for it. I know that's before even picking up the gamepad to play, but I'm guessing the same for you. It was never going to get purchased in any other way unless it was really cheap on a digital offer somewhere. Like, it's not getting purchased day one, was it?
No, it's one of them games that we'd normally. I mean, even the Division we got when it was on offer. I think
Yeah,
the
we
original
did.
one and Div 2 we got on offer. So it would have been one of those games. But if you've already got Game Pass and it's out day one, it's like a bit of a no-brainer not to have a look, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So we boot up Outriders. What do you have any expectations going into this? Do you know roughly what it is? I mean, I'm sure you see that it's third person. You're hearing that it's got co-op in it. It might have loot. It looks a little bit like Gears of War, but you've got powers. I mean, before the game's even been started, what's happening? As it's being powered up, and you're thinking, right, what am I getting in for here?
Yeah, I mean, when I did have a little look into it, but I don't like to look too far because I don't like setting expectations really.
Mm,
But there was a Twitch stream going on. A lot of them got obviously paid as they do to play it day one, and I watched a little bit of that stream. Not
yeah.
too much. I think I watched about 15, 20 minutes of it, and it kind of gave me a bit of a feel for it. But the initial feel I got was mixture between Gears of War, The Division, and Destiny.
Mm,
But obviously Destiny only in terms of the a real far-reaching link. It was kind of Destiny because it was the way that it had the end of the world kind of save your business, and I mean,
right.
it's
Yeah.
different but the same kind of stuff. Obviously, Destiny's a first person, this is a third person, but it was kind of mishmash of all that stuff, and
Yeah.
that's what I kind of expected going into it. Anything with loot is generally a bit of a sniffer for me. The only one that never really resonated was that bloody Borderlands, but maybe that's my
No.
fault. I don't know.
Well, no. Again, when you were playing on the old 360, I think. No, was it? I remember you was playing on the one. Maybe something happened. You had awful frame rates, which
Yeah, that it
actually is coming full
was.
circle with this game in a way. Of other technical issues that we'll get to, but
Yeah, I think I was playing it via backwards compatibility. We might have
mm,
originally started playing it on the 360, like we're going back years
yeah,
now. But then I remember starting it again when it was backwards compatible. Oh no, it was it was the collection that come out, and that's
yeah,
where we picked it up again, and that just kind of fell off.
fell off
Um,
quite quickly.
fell off quite
Well, it weren't
quickly. Yeah,
it was all like when you opened a chest, there was only ever one gun between four of you or three of you,
yeah.
and that when you got Hall in your team, you ain't going to get
He's
the best
always quick
gear.
to that loot.
He nicks it
He's
even if
got.
he doesn't, even if you don't need it, he'll have it, and
Yep.
I get annoyed slightly, and then I remember I withheld a fucking sniper rifle from you for longer than I should have done because I wasn't even using it, and you were a dedicated sniper man. Then after that, things get binned, but. Outriders itself, so we boot it up, we play it. What do you start getting into some of like the sort of the headline parts of the game? I guess how things operate, high level, and I'll give a little bit of opinion, then just hand it over to you. Story and like narrative, not really your forte. Sort of more what I'm interested in. My overall view of the game is this is having played it. We've played it to completion, and we've done one session of the end game type jobby. So we've got a rough understanding of how that works, but we spent a lot of time with the campaign because, spoiler alert, it's fucking long. So you've really got to buckle up for that one if you want to get through it all. In terms of the story, I felt like the actual moment to moment story was actually pretty bad at times, like not that great. But I must say, I did like the lore elements, like the world they had set, like the overall setting, like they had to leave Earth because the planet was fucked, and that might become a reality very soon. For people, I mean, I got told the other day to hand my pet in because its emissions were getting too high, and I was like, well, I mean, where are we going with that? But that's a different podcast, unfortunately. And they left Earth, found a new planet. That goes to shit. And like all the effort they put in to build this world, I actually quite enjoyed that effort. I felt that's actually still got potential in there somewhere. But I didn't really think the journey you go on as a player was that good with the narrative beats. What's your opinion of the story? It's normally for you a means to an end, but it can be a nice bonus for these little games.
Yeah, similar to you in that I liked, like I was more into the story when it started. So the way that they set the scene and things like that, the fact that they're in cryo, the stuff with the Earth, they found this new planet that they're gonna, bring everyone down to and start a new civilization on this planet. I was like, yeah, I'm all down with that. But as the story progresses, it definitely loses impact. And you think you're trying to find this sort of the end, if you like. You're just searching for something, and
Yeah.
it just loses meaning, I think, after
Yeah.
a while. So yeah, I mean the story generally in these sorts of games is as you said, it's usually a means to an end, and as it is for me, it normally is in these sort of games.
Yeah.
But I like the lore. The story was a bit wishy-washy and a bit confusing. It didn't piece it together as well and as clearly as I would like, and I think that's kind of probably a little bit of a theme of the game. Really, it doesn't do enough to tell you in your face what's going on,
No.
basically.
There is also the element we have to consider that whenever you're playing a game like this with another person, we played the whole thing cooperatively, just us two. There is a chance that we're not paying full attention because I'm trying to say something ridiculous or we're chatting. Like, I don't think we did it too badly during cutscenes, but we
No.
definitely were reacting to certain moments and going, "Whoa," like, and then that can take you out of it. So, but I think overall it's a fair assessment. It's not necessarily because we weren't paying attention 100% of the time. But that is a consideration for people. Yes, we weren't completely silent throughout this. We were
But
chatting.
we're normally pretty respectful to each other. I mean, I know that you always like silence in cutscenes, and
Yeah, but then I'll start
so
talking myself.
yeah, but that's your choice then. I think, well, he's broken that silence. That's his problem. But it's little things, really. So one thing the Division does well is it makes you listen to those bits of lore, whereas this just chucks it. It says you've picked up a note, read it yourself, and it's like, I'm never going to read that.
Yeah. Hundreds of
And that's
collectibles, like
yeah,
madness.
and that's what I mean when I say it could do more in terms of telling you what's going on and keeping you updated, rather than expecting me to read through a book's worth of notes.
There's so much that I checked it the other day and I was like, good lord. We haven't got everything. We got most of it. Didn't get everything, but most of it we got. And I was like, Jesus Christ. It would literally take hours to read through all this. I think one thing the story definitely suffers with, and this will feed nicely into perhaps the gameplay at some point, but we're just going to go there now, is the overall length of this campaign. I mean, what did we do? We checked the stats, and I think we clocked in at just under 30 hours or just over 30 hours.
Over.
Now, normally that can be a blessing and a curse. We've both played Creed 100 odd hours and been happy to spend our time doing that, but this felt like, not just from a story perspective but also just from gameplay and mechanics, that it all kind of ran dry. I think they could have chopped a third off this. It should have been 20 hours. Somewhere 15 to 20 hours would have been much more palatable, because particularly on the end stretch where it just felt like filler and it's going on and on and on. That's when things felt like they stalled a hell of a lot. It was in that last third, and I felt like you could have truncated that, chopped off some bits in the middle, made a bit of a more of a 20-hour package. Then your gameplay's not as worn out, you're not as frustrated perhaps, and then the end game's still there if you want to go further, and you're perhaps not as burnt out. What do you make of the length of the game for the story and the narrative pieces?
Yeah, I think it could have been shorter. I mean,
It's hard though, isn't it? Because people want value for money, but that comes at the cost of enjoyment sometimes.
It definitely, and I wouldn't say I ever found it particularly from an aspect of solely the length of the campaign. I don't feel like that was the main issue. I
Right.
feel like the main issue is, and this is where we get into the structure and the gameplay of it, is that largely the enemy visually changes,
Yeah.
but the style of what you're doing never does, really.
Mechanically, it doesn't really improve or advance, does it? You said they all change skins, for lack of a better word, but they approach you in very much a similar way that they did day one.
Yeah, and you've got the same type of enemies in everything that do and behave similarly,
Yeah.
almost in similar environments with a similar layout of cover and stuff. So that's the bit for me that got exhausted. You kind of, you walk up to an area, it goes clear the area, and it's like, yeah, I knew that. Like,
Yeah, I did.
almost before you've even got there, what you're doing, it's clear down the area
Yeah.
or whatever. So I think that's what makes it run drier is the lack of variety
Yeah.
in the enemy type, I think.
Yeah, there's not too many. I actually felt like they responded and the AI wasn't actually too bad. Like they do keep you on your toes at time. I know you can't be sitting, and this we'll get into this. I know this was an issue for you, but trying to hang back wasn't really an option because you're getting bum rushed all the time. But I like, especially in the early games, all the different types of enemies felt enjoyable. But it's rinse and repeat far too much, and then by the back end, it's just you're just playing the numbers game, and it's you know exactly what the enemies are going to do, how they're going to react, and all they do really is increase the number of people to make it harder. There's no real increase in intelligence.
It's chuck more to
Chuck
like
more
that,
to
that becomes,
increase your fucking their resistance, so you put more bullets in them, make it longer, and it's a very simple formula. It's worked, but it's not particularly doesn't set the world on fire for me anyway.
no, same here. I think, I agree with I understand what you mean when you say the AI isn't too bad for the, basically everything will at some point essentially run at you, and that's what happens, and that's, in a way, you could say it's clever because it stops you hanging back. But when you've got different character builds designed for different things,
Yeah,
it becomes a bit of a muddle, really.
yeah.
And that's where I started getting snarled up.
Yeah. Let's move into the classes and how that affects your gameplay, because you can pick, what, 4 classes to start with? I can't remember all their names. I chose Devastator, I think it's called. And that was essentially, it was billed as a tank class. Now, did I feel like a tank? Not really. Not on World Tier 7 and 8, I didn't feel like a tank. I felt like a weak human hiding behind cover, just picking shots off. So I'm not quite sure what they were getting out of that label. What did you go for? I actually can't remember who you went for now. Was it the Pyromancer or the other one, the more
I
ranged
think it's
fella?
called. It was a range fella. Technomancer's in my
Ah,
head,
okay,
but that
yeah.
could be nonsense.
No,
I
no,
don't
no,
know if I've
that's
made
the one
that
with
up.
turrets, yeah. And you love them turrets, so
They're always useful. Any game like that, chuck down a turret.
chuck down a turret, sit back, sip a coffee, and then you're away, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you picked a more ranged character. I picked a more close-in character. So in reality, on the battlefield, in theory, we should have been further apart. But the way that they make all the classes quite unique is that they all have a different healing mechanic. You don't pick up any health just on the battlefield. You essentially heal. So in my case, I healed when I would kill or damage a higher powered enemy, like an elite, within a certain range. So I had to be sort of within 10 meters of them, and that would fill my healing bar. So I had to be quite close to re-heal myself, which at times was a bit of a blessing. That's quite cool to do that. But other times, when you're already getting your ass burnt, the last thing you want to do is be standing in front of these cunts or being near them. So it made things quite tricky at times. What was your healing ability on the Technomancer? Was it just purely damage from weapon
Damage.
range? That was it.
Any ability that any damage healed me, which sounds good, but when you just want to catch your breath, you just got to keep standing out there and shooting them or chucking your turret out or doing one of your powers or whatever it is what got me in trouble a lot, is the inability just to take a breath.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. I don't know. Not necessarily saying it is good, but in many games you sit back, you're quite defensive. Like, I can kind of see what they were trying to do in making it you have to kind of be aggressive to keep yourself topped up. I just don't think it always delivered at times, particularly on the more challenging difficulties. It's just not an option, and there's something just off of the balance in there. But I mean, would you consider it's not a good direction to do that, or perhaps it was actually okay from a philosophical point of view, but perhaps just didn't work for us because A, we're not really used to that style of play, and B, the balancing was probably a bit off, and it didn't really give us a hand there.
Well, I've never played a game where, and this is what I said to you pretty soon in. I was like, it's
Yeah.
just counterintuitive to everything games have taught me
Yep.
over the last 20 years. Like, you always expect that if you kind of get back, get in cover, wait for yourself to heal up or whatever, like, and then get back in the fight, and you constantly find yourself doing that, but it doesn't help you because those snippers will get you and they don't miss.
No.
So you find yourself back at the back of the fight, unable to heal because you can't hit anything, and you just getting hit with snipers, and it takes a bit of getting used to, where you just have to go, right, I know I'm getting hurt here, but I've just got to continue keep firing my weapon or whatever. And that is what I found damaged my ability to use other weapons as well, because I had to just go with the guns that's got the most bullets, so that I can just continue shooting, so I can continue to get heals.
The high RPM. Yeah, they definitely. I mean, mine was slightly different in that if I killed an enemy, it would generally heal me. So I could get away with the shotgun that was slow if it blew their head off and killed them. But they were definitely against the elites where I'd get it from damaging them. Like a submachine gun or a light machine gun was almost essential to keep health topped up, because it's the only way. There's no good me firing off one sniper bullet every 5 seconds, because that weren't going to be the required standard and the required level of healing I was going to get.
Yeah, that's exactly what I found. So my class was meant to be a sniper class. That's why all my buffs went and what it was designed to do. But for I mean, there are times when I used it to pick off other stuff, but largely it's a case of poking your head out there and just letting off with bullets, because you're doing damage and you're getting healed at the same time. So it just removes really any element of tactical thinking from it, because it just becomes hold the button down and shoot at everything so that you do damage and get heals. I mean, I don't mind it on its own, but I just feel like whenever you're in cover, or if you don't take damage for a period of time, you start regenerating health. I think that should be a mechanic.
Yeah, it regened a little bit of your health, maybe like a quarter, but not in. And that the thing was as well. I don't think it even matters necessarily what world tier you choose or what difficulty level. Your health evaporates so quickly. Like when you're out in the open, like it's a joke. And where I found it difficult is because my class was described to me as a tank. I was under the impression I could walk stuff down, and look, and sometimes I could walk stuff down, but very often I was running back to you with my tail between my legs. So I got in a state because my character wasn't built and never got to the stage where his health or resistance was high enough to take any reasonable amount of damage for me to really get up close and do it. So I had to be very in and out, really, and and jump in, really, if I was desperate to get health. I'd have to just do like one of my launch attacks and hope it killed them on the drop to respawn. Otherwise, I'd land next to them, not get any heals. They would finish me off, and then you'll be picking me up.
And leads to another issue where you have to steam off, for want of a better term, to do your thing, and then everything just runs. Anything between you and me, half of it runs at me, and I ain't equipped to deal with all that, so I just end up backing up with me back against the wall with an LMG out.
Yeah, and I think me going forward would also trip new spawns.
Yeah.
So it'd pile more enemies in, and you had a particular issue. We don't know whether it was network or Xbox One, because I was playing this on the Series X. Logan was on the Xbox One. Because he was in my party, all my load times were brought down to his level. I think we did a quick comparison. Mine took about 3 seconds. Yours was about 30 to 40. So I was getting dragged down to his level, which is annoying. And we don't know whether it is network. We don't know whether it is the Xbox One. We don't know what it was. But every time a set of new enemies would spawn into the arena or the area you're fighting, I never got to see it because I wasn't watching his screen. He was obviously sitting in his house whilst he was playing. I was in mine. His experience dipped completely. I mean, explain to the audience exactly what would happen when new enemies would come in, and actually, was it a useful trigger in the end?
Well, Yeah, I mean it's really simple. It's just lag, and I just rubber band around a little bit. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, oh, was it lag or is it performance? You know, is it that poor old 7-year-old Xbox struggling? But
Poor old fuck.
it can't be, because if it was struggling, it would be like juddery, and it
Yeah,
wasn't juddery. It was just it you know, I play enough online games to know when it feels like lag, and that's what it felt like. So it just spawned a load of stuff in, and I'd just start rubber banding around a little bit,
yeah,
um, and I'd be like, right, apps, more stuff's spawned in. It was just it become a warning for
yeah,
you to get back a little bit because I know stuff's coming. But I mean, I got used to that a bit in the end. But when we were first starting, I was like, what's going on here? Why can't I eat anything? You know, what's all this about? Trying to snip someone's head off, and I've got that going on.
no,
But yeah, that wasn't ideal. It'd be interesting. I do need to go back and do that just out of curiosity, because it's gonna bite at me if I don't. But it would be interesting to see if it does that on PC or other Xbox Series X consoles. If it is connection, it shouldn't make any difference.
yeah, yeah. That's true. That's very true. I want to talk about the world tier next because they do quite a strange difficulty level type sliding scale jobby. So it reminds me of Diablo when we played that.
Hmm.
We started unlocking about 30 different difficulty levels. I don't think we ever moved it up off the one we were on and was all like, what's going on there? And this has a very
Hmm.
similar one. It has 15 levels that you can unlock, and you have to unlock them. You can't just dump it on the highest level. Essentially, each level would have its a set criteria of like enemy level. So if you're on a harder difficulty, they might be 2 levels above your current level, or 1 level above, or 3 levels above, and it just keeps going. So it can get really silly. And then the percentages of drops for rare and legendary items would increase the higher you went. Your standard XP stayed the same, so you would level up in theory exactly the same. But if you wanted better drops, you're encouraged to put it on a higher world tier. Now we got to it. I think level 4 is what hard is considered, and that means the enemy levels are one above you, and your drops are like 120%. Blah 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 blah. We unlocked tier level 8, world tier 8, and I think before that point we were hitting a bit of a wall with 7, struggling, and it just became very very difficult. And we switched it back to 4. We switched it back to hard, which is still technically hard. Now, what do you make of that as a system there? Because in theory, there's a lot of leeway for the player to kind of tweak it to the right level that fits them. But I could have done with having my hand held a little bit and helped, because I felt like we were updating it every time. It was getting progressively harder and harder. We hit a wall, and we went right back down to 4, and it became really easy for a while. Then started catching back up, but I never felt like we got the difficulty right. And there are, just to add to the irritants, there's some insane difficulty spikes on some of the bosses and some of the checkpointing they fucking chuck at you during the game. So that doesn't help either. But there's a lot of options here. I just feel like they haven't directed us as players where we best fit.
No, I mean it obviously starts you off right at the bottom, and then it has a mechanic where it lets you. It will just automatically bump up the tier. So as you gain more XP and you level up, you unlock these newer, or these more difficult world tiers, which is fine. But it was only when we really got to 7 or 8 that we actually looked at the difficulty, and it was like core, it's like master or something, and we were like,
Yeah.
no wonder we're struggling here. Like, why are we making this harder for ourselves? And it's, you know, it we had to check it in the end, didn't we, and have a look and see, you know, what's the story, and we had to go online and do a bit of research. And it's kind of like, again, it goes back to the game, just kind of letting you. It doesn't babysit you through anything really. It doesn't
No.
explain to you the class skills, setting them up, how, you know, anything. It just lets you guess really. And it was the same with these world tiers. It was just a case of, I mean, we did say we'll just keep doing it until it becomes
Yeah, silly.
silly, which it did in the end. But it almost makes you feel bad for doing it on like hard.
I
Like
know,
we
yeah.
and we bumped it down, didn't we? And we were like, well, yeah, this is making it more manageable. But yeah, it just needs to explain that, and I'm not sure whether in these sort of games it works for me. I mean, I think tying it to your level or your, whatever numbers that you're getting, as long as you're getting better gear, it should be tied to that, and then it only needs a bit either way to say, do you want it a bit easier or do you want it a bit harder than this? Like the game should naturally make it challenging.
Yeah.
It shouldn't need me to fettle with 15 different settings ultimately. At some point, it shouldn't need that.
No.
And I think as you get further into the game anyway, I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to try some of the latest stuff on anything higher than what we were doing it on.
Oh no, absolutely not. Like it does get challenging, and like I said, with those difficulty spikes, it's not akin to sticking something up your arse just suddenly just to keep you on your toes, which is not ideal. So yeah, I think I kind of like the idea of it, but I think in the way it's panned out for Outriders, in the fact that it didn't really. I had to go online to really suss out exactly what we were doing. Like, where were we going to miss out by having it not on the highest available difficulty? I think that was our main concern, because it suggested that perhaps we should auto level it up, but that was not the case. I mean, all it meant was that we got lower level gear, but the enemies were lower level, so it did not really matter. Now, when you get to the back end of the game, for the end game, that's where your gear kind of and the level of that really matters. So I guess if you're going to play it for the end game, it'll give you a bit of a leg up if you can get through it. But other than that, like if you're struggling and playing this game and you're listening to this, like I would just put it on. You could put it on free, like put it on normal. Like just it really doesn't matter. Like you're not going to miss anything out from it, and it'll probably make things much less frustrating because it just gets progressively harder.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes that worse is the fact that you can't even sit down and go, right, get some and say, right, well, let's do it this way, or this, like basically get some tactics in play to deal with it. It just doesn't let you do that. It's kind of like your gears are high enough level or it isn't, or you got the right combination of skills or you haven't. It's it's very difficult to judge.
No. What did you make of the leveling up? So as a character, we set our classes. Now, you weren't able to change a class, and what a class essentially gave you was access to free abilities to start with. Like one of mine was like a charging ability. Another one of mine was this giant leap. I could use a tethering ability to suck enemies in. So you unlock all stuff, but it's all tied to your class you choose at the start of the game. And then throughout the game, not each time you level up. Sometimes when you level up, you get a class point, which you can then go into this little lovely looking RPG tree. It's got 3 sort of channels, and you're like, oh, that's going to be really good to spec all that out eventually. And we get to the end of the game, and you hit level 30. You don't go up anymore. At that point, it's all gear reliant. Like your whole progression in the end game is all based on your gear score, and we'll probably touch on that in a bit. So you can't get any more class points, and we come to the realization, well, we don't think you can get any more class points. Someone please correct us, but you can't fill out that RPG tree.
Nope.
So, what do you make of that? Because I know that frustrated you, seeing all those empty spaces that you're never going to be able to fill out. You're never going to become as powerful as you perhaps thought you were.
Yeah, I mean, when you first start it, you're like adjusting it to the challenges that you currently got, thinking it doesn't matter. I'll unlock all this anyway, and you don't. Like it gives you enough for one of the 3 trees,
and not even all of it. You still have to make some sacrifices on that journey. If you want the 2 big stats at the end, you have to drop a couple during that tree, because there's like little side bits as well. So you can't even get that fully specced out. But like you, I was expecting not to really matter because I was going to get everything. And I think we got quite late and was like, this tree ain't going up.
Yeah, it's like we'd leveled. I remember leveling up and going, didn't get a class point there.
Yeah.
Like, what's happened here? Like, why is it doing me out of that? I thought it might be a glitch, but it doesn't look like it is.
No, it sounds... And I don't know whether you can get them in the end game further, but we played for a couple of hours or so and didn't get an extra ones, and your level doesn't move anymore, and historically that was the only way to do it. So I don't know what that's all about. I wish I'd known that, because I'd have definitely taken a different approach. I would have looked at the end of each tree, each sub tree, and said, right, what's the best of those 3? I'm going to go for that. But because I was trying to do the everyman approach, I got about 10% all through 3 of them, and I really had no real guts on me at the end of it. So I wish
same.
Wish it bloody told me that.
those end powers right at the end are the ones that would have been super useful.
Oh yeah. The good
So
thing
yeah,
is you can reset the tree at any time, so you can restart that. Which some games that don't do that, I'm like, come on, just let me do that. But that plays into one of my other frustrations, that you can't try any other class. So I was thinking, I'll fancy playing as that trickster, trying that. But the only way to do that at present is to start a new campaign with a new character. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm a fucking altered human that's got superpowers. I should be able to just change classes here, but evidently not. So
yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, you can understand why locking it in, but in the lore that they've got, it wouldn't do any harm for
no,
you to just be able to change that through it. I don't see what harm that would do. So you just think,
no.
just because I was similar to you, after I'd realised there was no point in this long range game, I would have changed to something else. It
Yeah.
just offers no benefit.
Well, how do you think the actual the one of the I guess the unique things is that it's a third person shoot with cover that feels a bit like Gears of War, but you've also got these three powers like I mentioned, and you're expected to kind of blend those into your gameplay and mix it up. As a little loop of shooting, a bit of power dabbling, how did that at a sort of a macro level feel to you? Was it a good? You see more, like to see more of that, because we kind of get a little bit of that in the Division. You get like a couple of powers, like you can chuck a turret out and things like that, and put a shield up. But these were much more, at least in my class, much more direct sort of attack focused stuff.
Yeah, I guess most of mine was. I mean, I could tailor someone. I mean, I had that heel on for a while, didn't I? When it was
Yeah,
getting a bit hard, but I really felt like that was hurting what I could do because it was such a passive power. I always felt like I needed more. So it does encourage you to be more aggressive. I just think it's a bit confused. Like I just don't. Sometimes I just think, why have you put that cover there? Like it literally, the snipers can still hit me behind it. I'm getting rushed
yeah,
from behind it. It was just felt a bit. I think it lends itself to being a cover shooter, but doesn't. It's just not. Like anyone that thinks it's a cover shooter, it just you shouldn't label it as that
no,
because you can't heal behind it. Really, you can't do anything.
no,
It's relatively useless. But I did like. I felt like my powers, if you like, were
yeah.
useful.
Cooldowns are pretty reasonable. I
Yeah.
felt they get, you don't have to wait a long time for stuff to regen, so that's always
Hmm.
helpful. I think if you're going to give people stuff, like you don't think it's going to be 4 minutes before I can use this again, so I better make it count. Like you can use it pretty much like at whim, and perhaps hold back one or two for disrupting certain enemies. But
Yeah, and it
yeah,
lets you equip things, and some of my progression tree reduced the cooldown of my
yeah,
gadgets and stuff as well. So it does that quite well. I didn't find the combat um, unsatisfying on a whole. I mean, again, you sort of get a bit used to what you've got. But like, I remember unlocking that rocket launcher power, and I was like, "Cool, this will do some damage," and it just didn't. So
no,
that felt a bit underwhelming, I guess. But like those blighted rounds that I had, like chucking them on and just absolutely melting someone with 80 rounds of it was super satisfying.
yeah,
I quite like the blend. I just wish I wasn't so squishy.
yeah.
I feel like if I wasn't as squishy, I could make a better use out of my power.
Yeah, and I feel like they could have done that with reducing the amount of enemies so you didn't get so many bullets in your ass, or just making your character more resistant. Sorry. So
Mm.
there's definitely things they could have done to make that better. Loot. This is what people have come here to hear about. I hope they haven't, because that's a real disaster. I'm not a big fan of this loot stuff because it just becomes a numbers game. You're looking for on the road and then not getting it. Now, you've got obviously, it's a very standard, I think, loot system in that each weapon has a rating and there's slightly different roles and mods that you can get as well. The mod part of the game is something I really wish I'd delved into a bit more. I think you spent some time fiddling with that. But
Mm.
high level or low level, whatever, loot, armor, weapons, and mods. What are we looking at here for people?
Yeah, so it's your standard common toot, greens,
Yeah.
bluebells,
Green garbage, bluebells,
purploids, and
purploids.
goldies.
Yeah.
So it's the usual system. In terms of weapons, you got there is some variety there. Um, but again, going back to my earlier point, it's like they do like burst rifles or one-shot rifles and things, and it's just
Yeah.
not ever cutting the mustard. Um, So they kind of give you that variety, but the way that the game's structured, you have to run an LMG or an SMG or both really. So that's all right. And then as you know, that common to or that green, it's just stats.
Yeah.
And then as you get into the blues and the purples and the legendaries, you get the mods that go with it. And some of the mods are pretty cool. Like I got one gun that throws an enemy when I hit them with it.
Yeah.
Super useful. So I think it would have been useful to, again, it's like, show me what I'm supposed to be doing
Just
here.
Zahidi was sitting there unused, wasn't he, for most of the game? Actually, he had quite a lot of use if we'd sat down and learnt the system.
Yeah, because I think if you get a gun with a certain mod and you dismantle that gun,
yes,
you get rid of the tip, but you also then keep that mod permanently.
Yeah.
So you can put that mod on any weapon interchangeably or armor, which is a really cool system, I think. So it can really customize your gameplay, also to the type, also to the situation.
Arguably more powerful than some of those abilities.
Yeah,
because some of the stuff that you can get in the mods is really, really powerful in certain situations. And like, if
some of the mods buff up your powers.
Yes.
So, for example, I had those blighted rounds which do ridiculous damage, but one of the mods that I put on my gun gives me an extra mag of those blighted rounds and stuff. So, again, if you dabble in that stuff early on and understand it and know kind of it all goes hand in hand, right? Because if you know the class progression you're going to move along on that skill tree, you know what kind of character you're going to be, you know what kind of guns you need, and then therefore know what kind of mods would go with that. But it doesn't tell you any of that at all throughout it, and it's only when you get to the end of it, when you get some of the better mods, where you go, actually, that's really useful. And then you look at it and you go, oh, I could have done all this.
And
that would have been fun.
And also, like, I think I mentioned this to you several times, and you probably have the same feeling sometimes. You think in these looter shooters, in these level-based games where you're always going up the food chain, the common assumption is, well, I'm going to get this perploid, and then in 3 arenas, it's going to be it's going to be out of level, it's not going to be of any use. So, for some reason in my head, I felt like I just had to play the numbers game, and that the going after the firepower rating or the armor rating was the way to go. And just from past experience, that you just have to chuck stuff away. I just wasn't really aware of this mod system until really it was too late. And you'd gone off your own back and sort of delved into it, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually very useful." And I was actually, now it's in the end game, and we kind of sussed it out, but. My previous assumption of that you just throw away items, whilst true, it's not as simple as that, because you get to keep the mod and that can be applied elsewhere. And
it doesn't babysit you through that selling system, crafting or modding. It lets you know it's there if you want to use it, but it doesn't. You don't know whether you're better off crafting or whether you're better off selling, or what you get for crafting, what you get off for dismantling. What it doesn't make any.
It's just scrap going.
Yeah, and in the end, it's like we made a decision, didn't we? Certain ones scrap, certain ones sell.
Yeah.
But when you get to that end game, it all becomes largely redundant anyway, because you're looking for these drop pod currency, if you like.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to get the big stuff. But it's all right. It's not unsatisfying, but again, it's like you feel like you're constantly swapping in and out, swapping, and you get so used to doing that.
Yeah.
You kind of forget about the modding piece.
Yeah, you don't take a moment to delve into that, and
no.
That's I would say that's just born out of the way these games are. Is that I feel like I'm trained to do that, swap it out, chuck it away. And really, there was actually quite a cool system underneath it with the mod system that could have been customised and tweaked with. But at the same point, you don't want to be sitting there in the fucking menus for half hour between missions. So it is a balance of, yes, I want to delve in the mods, but do I want to spend so much time fiddling? And then, as we just mentioned, you're going to get a load of good stuff on your next run and probably have to change it all again. So I don't know what the solution is to that. I think it actually is a really difficult problem to solve, because people constantly want more stuff and they want to feel like they're getting better. Whilst not really having to, they don't want to spend, I don't want to spend too much time fiddling if I can help it. But then I've in this case, I've missed out on a cool system.
I think the thing that I would say struggled, and not necessarily struggled with in this game, is that it dropped too much green and blue stuff, like toot basically,
Yeah.
off enemies too often, and then when you killed some of the bigger stuff, it didn't give you enough rewards.
Yeah.
So I would have preferred to have seen less drops, but more interesting drops, if that makes sense. I think that you just end up
make
just
them more
going,
meaningful.
yeah, basically. I think
Yeah.
there's so much of it that you just got, you get a green that's worth this, you get a blue that's worth that, you just get inundated with all these numbers. I'd have preferred it if the end, because why would a big old beastie be dropping a purploid? Like, when you actually break it down, why would he be doing it? Like, if there's a chest at the end or a room at the end or something, and you open the chest and there's your reward,
Yeah.
like, that's fine. But yeah, it's okay. I felt like it was alright, but you just end up chasing numbers, and because you're not really aware of this mod stuff, and to be fair, it probably is more relevant for the end game stuff, so it's not the end of the world. It doesn't tell you about it to then, but if you're not interested in that, then you miss out on something that's quite interesting throughout a whole campaign.
Yeah, which is pretty much exactly what we did, unfortunately. Any other high level items that you wanted to touch over? Because if not, I've got a list of like hits and misses to chat about. But anything else that you wanted to get off your chest before I go on some really strange, not strange, but some very specific annoyances that I've picked out, or positives.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to start with the negatives, right? I think there's some really annoying technical elements to the game that I'm sure you'll touch on, and I'll probably leave that in entirety to you. But the main one for me was the waypoint system. That was just diabolical.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like the game was a bit confused between open world and linear. It's kind of like it was a linear game that wanted to do open world elements, and it just didn't. It's like when we spent ages looking for some stuff, and it's like, what am I looking for? And it was just a bit odd in that respect. It doesn't direct you specifically to what the right areas all the time. It gets snarled up in itself quite a lot.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, like the technical side of the game is pretty poor. I think that adds to the frustration for sure. I don't think we've not necessarily unanimously sung its praise in the gameplay and loot area and whatnot. I think we've had a good time with it in that sense, I think. But there was just so many things that were just constantly pulling us down, constantly. So, I mean, one of the first things is there's a lot of loading in this game. There's a lot of, you need to go to area A. Okay, I can walk to area A. Okay, now you need to go to area B. Oh, okay, there's a bridge there or a gap. I've got to jump over it. Oh no, you've got to go to fade to black. Watch your character jump over it, fade back in. It's like, and that happens constantly. And the annoying thing is that the game has. So there's a point where we got separated by one of those loading screens. It shouldn't let you do that. But basically, the game crapped out, and loading was actually on the other side of this wall through this crack. Because another one is that you squeeze through a fucking gap like you do. And he was running around in an area that was full and had all that. So it was there. It wasn't loading. It wasn't closing down that session and then going, right, I'm loading this new area up. It was all there for us to actually go to. But for some reason, it restricted and made us go through these loading screens. And that happened also with when parts of the map would sort of, you'd go into like an area, it maybe spiral up and then go over, and you'd be able to look down and you could see the chest that is only accessible through a loading screen if you go back through it. But it was there glowing. It was all rendered. It was all there. But for some reason, they put these fucking little transition phases in there. And it really just completely breaks up the flow of things. Like if you were going through like a whole area and wanted to just, I don't know, grind or do a mission again, like this completely breaks the flow of that. I was like, if they do a second game, one of the big things I want to see improved is that all these zones you go to, like they all have like there's quite a few zones, although a lot of them get repetitive. Have at least all those zones like seamless, like open area, like Destiny. You go to the EDZ and it's open, isn't it? There's no fading down. I know it plays tricks in the background, it's doing stuff, but for me as a player, I'm just walking through a tunnel, or running through the tunnel that's there, and it feels a seamless experience. The amount of times it interfered and had to stop things really bothered me.
Yeah, it wasn't good. And the thing is, at the beginning, you don't know it's going to do that. So you're like trying to figure out what's over this bridge then, and it doesn't let you go over there. And it's like,
It's locked. Yeah,
it's locked. And then obviously you come to one of these side quests or whatever and go to do it, and it's one of these transition screens, and you go, but it's literally like a second or two.
Yeah.
Like just see him jumping. It's just like, why is that in a game in 2021?
Yeah.
Like I thought we got rid of this years ago.
Yeah, that's what made it feel definitely like a bit of a throwback for sure. You mentioned the quest markers, so for some reason this felt like it only happened about. Well, I thought we was well over halfway of the game, but in hindsight, we were probably just reaching the halfway mark. It suddenly started. We'd finish a side quest, and then usually have to hand it in to someone, which is in another area, which is another loading screen. So you have to physically travel your convoy to there. Using the map, and you sit through another loading screen. So what we would typically do is in each area clear down as much as we could, then do all the hand in afterwards. For some reason, it started to at the end of every side quest. If I did not switch the quest to the new quest we were going to go to before we fast travel back to camp, it would mess up the waypoint system. So the waypoint you press up. When it works, it's great. It's this little line that comes out and it'll show you where you've got to go and take you off to the area you need to go. For some reason, it would go back to the area you just were. It would always try and take me back, or us back, to wherever the completion point for the previous quest was. And that is, in itself, shouldn't really be a problem, because you should be accompanied by a map that shows you where you are. So you think, right, okay, it's telling me to go left, but I can see on the map that we need to go right for this new quest. But the map is not really in real time. It just shows you the general area you're in. So you're forever hunting around trying to think, right, Logan, what way are we facing here? Right, I think we're facing north, so I think it's down this way. And then it'll either update randomly or it wouldn't, and you have to go back. But it's just sloppy things like that. It really got on
I had my feet up, didn't I? I was letting you deal with all that, but it was even annoying me after a while.
Well, it just slows things down.
To witness it. It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, basics.
Yeah, it's basics. I remember there's a boss fight we did quite early. There's 3 phases to it. Each phase had its own black loading screen and re-intervention of the boss. And I was like, this is really breaking the flow. I've just loaded to come in the fucking area because it don't let you do that without a fucking load screen. So that's annoying me. We've done the quest markers. Lots of wisecracking protagonist I've wrote down here. He's a bit jolly, this cunt, isn't he? I know he hasn't been through the wars like all these poor other bastards have, because he's stuck in cryo, but he's a bit too upbeat for me. I don't know what you thought, because you create your character, you change their appearance, voice stays the same, delivery stays the same. You don't have any agency over the story. You make no decisions, so you are stuck with this guy or gal. So I don't know what you thought of the fella. My guy was called Virgil, and he seemed a bit too upbeat for me, really. This is a depressing world, and he didn't fit the mould.
Yeah, it didn't really. It sort of come out of nowhere. It sort of goes from trying to be serious to really overly sort of jokey to try and be funny. And I think it struggles with the tune that it wants to set. I mean, some of it was amusing in a weird kind of way, but it's only because you then. I don't know. It's don't get me wrong. He's invincible, right? He can't die, basically. So
Yeah.
He's got a bit of a laissez-faire attitude to a lot of things.
Unless you're playing the game, in which case you get fucking melted down by a standard bullet. So disconnect there.
That. But yeah, I agree. It was kind of. It started off the game very serious. He was a serious dude, Outrider. I'm here to, army sort of military attitude to things. And then randomly in the game, he just starts being this sort of it reminds me of Spider-Man. You know, when Spider-Man started when he starts doing that dance, when he's running Tobey Maguire. And he starts doing that dance.
Oh yeah, where he gets sort of Venom, yeah.
It's just completely out of character. You just think, where's this come from? It sort of hits you like that. but I kind of got used to it a bit in the end, like his style. I'd have preferred it if it was a bit more serious, because ultimately the lore of the game leads you to be, it's a serious story basically. So I don't know why his character's basically at odds with the whole story.
Yeah,
that's what I determined, but I just accepted it in the end.
No, you don't fit in. The only other one I've got here is that you can't pause during cutscenes and you can't pause the game, which is par for the course for these online games when you're in a co-op. But even solo, you can't do that, and that does annoy me slightly. And I understand it's because the session's open, technically it's an online, la la la. But if I need a piss or I want to get a coffee, I can't be just doing it mid-battle. I've got to finish off the battle, make sure I'm safe, then sit down. So that irritates me.
Yeah, that's fair.
The only real hits I had really is that I feel like they had a good go at trying something different. And the more specific thing that I liked, which every loot game should have, is the postmaster. That old postie from Destiny. So if you forgot to pick up an item during your fight or your battle, you missed it, the postie will pick it up for you and deliver it, which I think is always good because I hate missing stuff and then not getting it. So there's that. Any other hits or misses for you before a real?
When I was playing it, I mean, the phrase I think I said most is "there's that bullshit again."
Yeah.
I did say that a lot, but I don't know whether that was frustration in the end or what. But I just think technically it.
Oh, we didn't talk about disconnections, did we?
No, I was going to touch on that.
Sorry, that's the. I can't believe I didn't write that down. Like,
so basically, I started that trend off, didn't I? Initially,
yeah, kicked it off for us.
We thought it was going to be an issue. We didn't know whether it was my console struggling or what it was. But then, funnily enough, as we got through it, it then became a bit of a mixed bag between you or I. I think there was one mission where halfway through, oh no, we haven't even talked about that door bullshit as well.
What one?
You know that door where I couldn't go through it. The door was closed, so we were stuck halfway through.
Oh my god, yes! During a mission, a large garage door is supposed to open to give you access to like the second part of the map. The door did not open. Enemies could walk through it. I couldn't walk through it. Logan couldn't walk through it. One of my powers was to go up in the air and then sort of jump on people. I could do that and glitch through the door, and then I was on the other side, and I could, in theory, do the next battle. But Logan couldn't get through, and there was no way to get him through, so we had to restart it. And that was quite early in hindsight. Should have been a warning sign.
Fortunately, because you went through the door, you got a checkpoint.
I did.
So because we both died, didn't we, to kick off the last checkpoint? And because you'd phased through and got that, it actually pushed us through.
Yeah.
But basically, that's a known issue in the game. And we were just, at that point, we'd experienced the rubber banding.
And we didn't play this as soon as it come out. It was like a couple of weeks after it, or maybe a week or 10 days, but like it already had a patch or two.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of it happening.
Yeah, this is significantly post-release. But yeah, we had that, and then obviously we had continued random DCs throughout.
You got booted out a couple of times. Yeah, we got a bit lucky. But then in the later part of the game, it kept just chucking me to the dashboard, like just hard crashing the game. And I was like, what's going on here? Yeah, that sort of stuff. Again, amongst the other stuff, is probably the stuff that drags the game down the most, which in some ways is a shame, but in other ways it's just like, well, if you're going to do one of these
games now,
no,
it just doesn't happen.
The bar is very high, unless you're Cyberpunk. The bar is very high, and as it should be. That sort of bullshit should be ironed out. Really,
it is a AAA game.
Yeah,
like, it is. Whatever way you look at it, it's a AAA game. So, you know, I can't remember ever playing a Call of Duty or anything like that. This has to be said on a 2014 Xbox One as well that I'm playing it on. You know, Creed didn't have any issues, and that's a big old bloody game.
Yeah.
So it's still playing reasonably demanding games. And I think it's damning more than anything that it's doing on a brand new console.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't be dashboarding with that frequency. I mean, basically every time we played it, we probably experienced one or two, or both, you and I, going to dashboard or crashing out completely.
Yeah. It's not really good enough.
Oh, and the other thing that we had, sorry, there's so many things that we forgot about. When you would crash out, or when I would crash out,
Ah.
you then had to come out, close the game in the dashboard, and reload it again so that I'd get the invites to the party.
Both of us would have to do that. So if one of us got bumped out, the other one had to restart the game anyway. It was so strange. Like, invites would not work unless we did that, and it was like, what is going on here? And that took a few tries to figure that out. It was like, what's going on here? Why aren't you getting the invites? I was blaming him. I was like, where are you? It's been DC'd, and I'm fucking sitting here in this menu.
Getting told off for it.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
know.
my
It wasn't his
fault.
fault. Yeah.
But yeah, there were so many little things like that that are easy to gloss over, but add to the frustration of the experience.
I think what
because it
happened
could
was
happen at any point.
it just happened so regularly that I was almost numb to it. Like towards the end of it, I was just like, this is the game. Like, this doesn't
You
feel.
just take it.
Yeah,
You
this
just,
doesn't.
you
This
just
doesn't.
go, ah.
This doesn't feel like it's not normal now, and I guess that's why I sort of erased it from my brain. Really quick, we'll touch on the end game. I mean, I can give a quick once over, and if you want to add anything, you can. Essentially, the end game is you don't, your character no longer levels up. You basically go through single missions that are quite short, probably no longer than 20 minutes. They're new maps, but in areas that you've been to previously, so you'll recognise all the aesthetics and the enemy types and whatnot. And the basic crux of it is, because you don't level up anymore, the way you're going to get through this is to make sure you've got high level gear and better gear. So all that stuff sort of starts to unlock, and there's some real heavy hitters, like Logan mentioned, that you can buy some super good gear, but you need to do a lot of grinding to get that. And the way to grind is to select a challenge tier level that will decide again, the level of the enemies, how difficult it is, and the potential rewards. So obviously they increase the harder you do it. And then the other sort of little flavour they've added on to the end game missions are that they are all timed, and your reward is based on the time you take. So there's like a gold, silver, bronze, and then like not a fail, but like a non-graded stuff. And obviously, if you get a gold, you get more loot, or more percentage chance of loot. It's all percentages. There's no guarantees in this game, which is something that will irritate some people, I guess. But that's how most of these games work. And then you'll also you may unlock a new challenge tier to play with and try. And to unlock the very final mission, we never got this far. We played it for 2 hours and then chucked it in because I think we were tired by that point of the game, and that was a fresh session. And you've got to unlock all the challenge tiers, and I think there's 15 of them. So you're going to have to do those higher tiers, and you have to get all the. I can see where it's going, and it feels quite a meaty end game. I must say I didn't hate the idea of that. I'm not fond of this timing bollocks, because sometimes it does get so hard that you're under pressure a lot and you need to catch your breath. But I actually felt like the areas, because it was just A to B, there was none of this faffing like, oh, where am I on the map? It made things so much more simplified, and actually some of those were quite enjoyable, those little missions. I remember one of them we went to, there's a boss to fight usually at the end, and the guy was having like a party in like a warehouse somewhere, and I was like, oh, that's quite cool. Had some potential there, but I think we were so burnt out from the campaign. Again, you chop off 10 hours of that, cut a third of it out, and maybe we spend another 5-10 hours in the end game plugging away. But I think we were so we're over it really at that stage.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I'd have preferred to your point, cut 5 hours off the campaign, add 5 hours onto endgame. But the trouble with that endgame is there's at the moment there's no reason to do it beyond just saying I've done it, like ticking a box.
Yeah.
Like if there was, if you really want those powerful weapons, then you can grind it. But there's nothing. I think harking back to Destiny, there was that raid, so you knew you had to get the better weapons to do that raid. It's like Destiny finishing, saying you can do those Nightfall strikes, but there's no raid to aim for.
There is a final expedition that they were tabling, but
yeah, but it's not
going to be anything outside the norm of. There's going to be no. The raids in Destiny have a level of mechanics and cohesion that you need to do with 6 people. This would just be a very hard mission that we've done, I would suspect.
Yeah, with a big old boss,
with a big old boy at the end, with Took coming out, and then you beat him and go.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that that's what Destiny does, but it does, but it adds a layer as you say, there's some mechanics that you have to master that make it interesting. But yeah, I think to a point, it's kind of like, unless it's there if you want it, it can't be sniffed at because they're giving you that content. But I just think once you get to the end of that, you kind of like, because they're not, and it's not necessarily a criticism of the fact that they're not changing things all the time and adding new challenges in and doing this, that, and the other every week. Like, it's not that sort of game, and they've never promised it would be. But I think that's what makes end game content difficult, is that if there isn't something continually to work for or to get, or different challenges to do, it just becomes a bit boring.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Right, the all important part is what sort of, not really a score. We give like 2 thumbs up, 1 thumb up, thumbs in the middle, or 1 down, 2 down. So it's a very straightforward system. Logan, the first time you've done this in a long time, probably years actually. But where are you going to put your thumbs for Outriders?
It's really difficult because the technical aspects of the game bring it down so much. I mean, for me, I'd probably say it's 1 thumb down. And the reason for that is because I think if technically it was flawless, the game would be average. I think I think that's where it sits for me. But because of all those technical issues that we had, it definitely brings it down for me.
Yeah, I would definitely put 1 thumb down as well, unfortunately. Again, the technical issues drag it down. I get annoyed at things that are needlessly too long, so that didn't help it. It wasn't interesting enough for the full campaign. And ultimately, had I not played this, I don't think, and those that haven't played it, I don't think you're missing out on a great deal, is the crux of it. I know there's some areas that love it. They think it's really the innovation there between blending the abilities and the shooting and the cover is new. It's like, well, you're not technically wrong, but I just never felt like it came together cohesively enough and consistently enough. I think there were some good highs where it would come together, like we'd either gel our powers together, or I'd be able to tether them together, or you'd feel powerful in those situations, but then you just get shit on in the next 4 minutes, and it just evaporate all the goodwill it built up, and that was just a constant thing, and it was slowly but surely coming further and further down. So unfortunately, it's a 1 thumb down. I wouldn't. If they said there's an Outriders 2 and it's the same length, I'd walk away from it almost immediately, unless all technical issues were fixed and then they did something else interesting. But I think, unfortunately, I would have to agree with Mr. Logan that will sit in that category and never to be played again. That'll be the end of it.
Yep.
Cool. Well, unbelievably, I did have other subjects on the docket that we could have spoken about, but we played a lot of Outriders recently, so sometimes we do real deep dives, and that's going to be one of them. So we'll get to those another time in the future, but I don't think there's much more else to say other than thank your good self for joining us this week. Good to have you back.
Yep, good to be back for twice a year show. I'll do one here, and I'll be back for the quiz in December.
Well, now you've got all this technical stuff set up, I'll be coming back to you. Now I've seen it works. That's what I do. I find those that have got the technical set up and drag them on.
It shouldn't be hard, should it?
It shouldn't be, but some people, not naming any names, Adcock, make it difficult, and you have to put a static image of him sitting there with his top off. And it's like, that's not helping anyone, is it? So we're trying to get that sorted. But there's definitely other stuff I wanted to speak to you about, which we'll get to another day. I'll tease the audience with that, so when you're back, it'll either be a game that we've both been playing, or it'll be one of those subjects, or maybe a blend. We'll see. But everyone, thanks for listening as per usual. You know where to find us. Twitter is @Dimp Digital, Instagram's Dimp Digital, Facebook's Dimp Digital. The YouTube channel's finally got its identity back, so that's youtube.com/Dimp Digital. Excuse me, after I fucked about of it last year, I had to wait a whole year to get that back, so that was a real error on my part. Ronnie weren't happy with that. That was torturous for him. So that might even start me booting up for some new content, but I'm not going to promise anything on that front. But nothing more for us to say here, other than thanks for your time, and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.